Welcome to Ramesh Sharma, a very special director and a very special person. I think anyone who's been in Delhi and its vicinity or anywhere, anyone who knows him will know him to be one of the warmest and kindest persons around. But more than that, he's, of course, the director of New Delhi Times, which is iconic for any journalist. It's the one film that probably made journalists out of a whole generation who grew up in the 80s. And he's back with a wonderful new film. I saw it again last night and it really moved me to tears. It's Ahimsa, it's on Mahatma Gandhi and the enormous influence he had on movements around the globe. And one cannot even imagine, one thinks of him, of course, as the father of the nation, but really when one sees the Ramesh Sharma's movie, you realize he really was, in a sense, the father of the world. I mean, he was iconic in the African American movement, in the South African movement, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, more countries than you can name. And Ramesh has meticulously sort of chronicled each and every country where he's had influence with the leaders of these great revolutions. And we've had people like John Lewis, who unfortunately passed away shortly after this film. So it's one of the rare films where he talks at length about the impact that Gandhi had on the African American movement. And it ends, of course, without giving too much away, with George Floyd. So you know exactly how relevant he is. Thank you so much for joining us, Ramesh Sharma. It was such a pleasure to watch it all over again. And thank you for doing this. It's something that really was crying out to be done. And, it just hadn't been done. Gandhi's influence around the world.
Yeah, I think thank you for having me at the Tiffin Talks. And
Thank you.
for me, Gandhi has been a passion for a very long time. I mean, as you know, I've made many films, many documentaries, and the last major documentary I made was on violence.
Yeah.
It was called The Journalist and the Jihadi, the murder of Daniel Pearl,
Daniel Pearl, yes.
which was nominated for an Emmy Award also and won the National Award in India.
Again, a
But it was
very powerful film.
Yes, but it was also about violence. And I thought to myself that, where are we coming in? The world is in a mess today. The world is literally destroying itself. If not physically, it is destroying itself physically, obviously, with the environment. It's destroying itself morally. It's destroying itself spiritually. In every aspect it is. And I thought, who is it that you can really look up to and say that there is an iconic figure who can inspire the young and actually bring back some sanity into the world? That yes, there is a way out which is other than violence. And one could only think in terms of Gandhi then, because it was 1906, September 11th, that is 9/11, which today we kind of associate with the greatest, violent attack in the world with Twin Towers. But it was in South Africa, in Johannesburg, in 1906, 9/11, that Gandhi first articulated the word Satyagraha. So he had actually shown a way 120 years ago, 115 years ago, before we even sort of knew about what it was. And so when I saw that coincidence, it was from then I wanted to raise money to make this film. Because I realized that if there has been one great export from India, other than the Buddha, it was Mahatma Gandhi. You can go to any place in the world, any small town in the world. I've been to Hungary, to a place called Balaton there in the lakes. I've been to London, to New York, to Argentina, everywhere there is a statue of Gandhi or there is a remembrance of Gandhi. And you realize that when you saw the Tahrir Square, incredible demonstrations taking place, no doubt that that major demonstration was crushed later and the Arab Spring frittered away. But Gandhi was still the motivating factor. If you realize the man who began it all through Google, the person who sort of coordinated that thing, he said Gandhi was my inspiration. And it was same thing in Tunisia, in where you had this Jasmine Revolution taking place. It was same thing that was happening in Yemen, and of course, the big revolution. So I thought, let us make a film, because every generation needs to be told about its icons in a new way, and there is no doubt that Richard Attenborough's Gandhi film had kind of defined Gandhi in a manner that nobody could really want to do another film on Gandhi. So when I went to look for money, everybody said, what do you want to tell about Gandhi? We know everything about him, And I said, no, you don't know, because there is so much influence he's had on seminal world movements that living in India, actually, we do not realize the impact he's had. In fact, I still remember many, many years ago as a young man, watching an ad being made by Spike Lee, one of America's great directors. And this was for Italian Telecom. And what did he use as a symbol? Gandhi. Yeah. It was Gandhi giving a speech. And then suddenly Italian Telecom had taken that speech all over the world. And people were listening in rapt attention. And he said, this is what Italian Telecom can do. Take the message of Gandhi to China, to Brazil, and of course to Italy, to Asia, to Africa, everywhere. And that became to me the real inspiration. I said, okay, let's now look into it from that perspective. Now, if I had made the film only about the freedom movement, which is obviously Gandhi's greatest sort of contribution, is the way he sort of fought the British in a non-violent manner, so to speak, I could have made a film. There is enough material for that. I could have made a film of Gandhi only in Africa, because his early days in Africa were pretty seminal in shaping his philosophy of Satyagraha, civil disobedience, But when you think in terms of what he has done in the civil rights movement in America, with Martin Luther King and with Reverend James Lawson and with John Lewis and all the others, and then you think in terms of what he did back in South Africa again with Mandela, though Mandela for a while took up arms. Yeah. But he came back to Gandhi's philosophy, ultimately, realizing that was the only way out. And then you think in terms of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that he set up with Desmond Tutu. That becomes the greatest Gandhian thing, because Gandhi always said, never hate your enemy, because tomorrow you will have to sit with him. And that's what South Africa did. It's a very tough thing to do, but he did that. And that was the most Gandhian of all. Is Gandhi's thing in concept in Poland. I spoke with, and you've seen it in the film with Lech Walesa. And Lech Walesa very categorically says that we realized the power of the communist movement was such that we could only think in terms of non-violence. And so we decided that whatever it may be, we will only go on a strike. That was like Satyagraha. That was civil disobedience. And as Mary Elizabeth King says in my film, if the people decide not to cooperate, nobody, no dictator, no tyrannical man can do anything about it. Yes, you may get bloodshed then, and you can have a Tiananmen Square, and you can have, shooting like in Jallianwala Bagh, but you cannot win the hearts and minds of people. And this was, to me, the greatest thing of Gandhi. Gandhi made sure that his movement had the moral force, the spiritual force, as I think Ramin talks about it in my film. Yeah. He says Gandhi brought in ethics in politics. Yeah. He brought in the spiritualization of politics. And when you have that in politics, you have a moral force that can become so strong that it moves people. And today's world, all that is missing. Today's world, ethics is not there in politics. In today's world, spirituality has gone out of politics. It's religion, and it's competitive religion. But Gandhi believed in interfaith harmony. He believed every religion was equal. He considered himself a Hindu because he read the Bhagavad Gita every morning and he knew everything about Hinduism. But he was not a proselytizer. He never said that you become a Hindu. He said, you are a Muslim, you be a better Muslim. You're a Christian, you be a better Christian. You're a Jew, you be a better Jew. Because he believed that everything was, every religion has its own value. to it was a very personal faith. And if you go to Ahmedabad and you go to, the institute that Gandhi set up, there is a room there called the Saturday Room, where every Saturday Gandhi used to teach people Bible. He was so moved by the Sermon on the Mount because it does talk about love and, do not hate, about compassion, about empathy. So all this, I thought, let me now see it in the perspective of the various movements. And let's make a film where Gandhi is seen not just as a figure of non-violence only, but a man who can bring actual, what you might say, a soul to a world that is soulless.
And Ramesh, a very interesting comment from Reverend Lawson was that non-violence is not the absence of violence; it's love in action.
Absolutely,
it's such a beautiful phrase,
yes.
And it is something that now, if politicians speak of it, they're laughed at. Yes. They're considered wimpish, and oh, what is this talk of love? But it really is. I mean, what other way can you communicate with each other if not through love? You cannot do it through hatred. So that love in action is such a wonderful translation of Ahimsa. Talk a little more about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what Gandhi sort of, and this is true, in 1936, Gandhi had talked to the African Americans in 35 or 36 when they'd come to request him to come to America. The strange thing is that whatever Gandhi was doing in India was being followed by the African Americans in America. The newspapers there were especially the papers owned by the blacks, the African Americans. They were publishing everything that was happening there, whether it was the SALT movement, whether it was what happened in Chauri Chaura, whatever he did, whatever civil disobedience, non-violent actions that he took. So he told them that the greatest splendor of unadulterated splendor of non-violence will be demonstrated to the world by the African Americans. And what Gandhi meant by that was, when you talk to your enemy, you talk to your opponent. He doesn't even call them enemy. He calls them your opponents. He says, you talk to them with humility. You talk to them with dignity, no doubt, but do not talk with hate. And in every aspect of his work that he did, that was his final that was his mantra. That is what he meant by love in action, because he knows that tomorrow, if I settle down with you, if I come to some terms with you, I need to have you talk to me again like friends. And this is what he did when he went to a court and people said to him, even he was being arrested, and the judge said that I cannot arrest you. Gandhi said, no, this is the law. You must follow the law. He was a purist in that sense. Unfortunately, he couldn't teach it to people because the violence that we saw in India after the partition and before the independence was absolutely horrifying. And it actually shattered Gandhi. But this was his basic action, that non-violence, ahimsa, is love in action, which means in every aspect you talk to your opponent, whoever it is, whoever you disagree with, do not use your hand. So if he beats you,
that is the most remarkable thing. And I didn't realize it, but now when you put it in context, then you see those visuals where nobody even raised their hand to defend
absolutely
themselves. They would just take the blows.
And the amazing thing about that, not just instruction, that was his training.
Yeah, amazing.
Before he began the SALT march, he took 79 people into his ashram. And for 6 months, he trained them because he knew that these people would get excited. He knew what would happen. I haven't got it in my film, but you realize what happened in Chauri Chaura. The great, disobedient movement was going on. And then suddenly people burned this police station and so many people died. And Gandhi brought a stop to the agitation. And everybody was upset with him. Nehru and Patel and Rajendra Prasad, all of them telling him that, my God, this agitation is doing so well. Why have you stopped it? And he said, no, you have not understood Ahimsa. This is not Satyagraha. This is not non-violence. That is non-violence then was reflected. He realized, I need to train my people. I need to show them how it has to be done. So he went back to his ashram before the Salt March, not just train them not to take the blows, but train them that if you go to the villages, do not impose yourself on them.
Right.
Don't make such that you're a burden to the villages. And when he went to the villages, he first went to the wells of the untouchables.
Right.
Because he knew that, the English were, the white man was sort of kind of, attacking the brown man, but the brown man was also attacking his own brethren.
Yeah.
This was the greatness of this man, that he believed in every aspect on truth and love. These were the two aspects of his, essence of his, what you might call his philosophy, around which he shaped an entire movement. And you found that in America. Reverend Lawson tells me, which I have not used too much in the film because I didn't have time for it, but he said that when they were sitting in these counters where there was segregation, and they were not being served while the white men were there, he said people would come and beat them. They would throw coffee at them. They would throw water at them. In order to make sure that people did not become violent, he said, we trained people. We kept them in the stools there. We kept them in the bar stools there. And we provoked them. We threw water at them. We got our own people to beat them and hit them and try to sort of, provoke them, instigate them, and to make sure that they wouldn't react. So that you could see this whole concept of, nonviolence as love in action. And that moral force, which John Lewis then talks about, when he's being beaten, almost literally being beaten to death.
And so, Ramesh, it's so moving when he talks about this person who comes to him with his son so many years later and begs his forgiveness. Oh my God, it is
absolutely. I wanted to get that man. Unfortunately, the man had passed away by the time I met John Lewis. The man and he was a Ku Klux Klan. He was the man who beat him. And this was so many years later, 40 years later, when he's a congressman, he comes to him and he says that I was the man who beat you. Right. I was the Ku Klux, the KKK man.
And they all start crying.
And they hug each other and then they start crying. I mean, this was, as I said, to me, John Lewis's life itself was the life that exemplified Gandhi, that exemplified Ahimsa. He was truly a symbol of the power of the powerless.
And I'm so glad you got him just in time, because I think shortly after that he passed away.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, he had told me, and I feel very sad about it. He told me he saw the film, which is very beautiful. Yeah. I happened to send him a link of the film, and I got a warm reply from his office saying that he's not well, but he's seen the film and he wants to show this film to his congressman. And had he been alive, he would have definitely done a screening for it. But for the COVID that kind of wrecked up and wreaked havoc with our, what we wanted to do with it in terms of a distribution. And now we've begun now, but it's kind of been a setback.
Let me tell our viewers that one of the reasons we're talking about Ahimsa is because it's won the Best Documentary Award at the New York Indian Film Festival.
Yeah, Best Feature Documentary.
Feature Documentary. So we must record that and have it on record. The other thing I wanted to focus on, Ramesh, which is quite remarkable, in the days before social media, Instagram, Gandhi's way of communicating. And, people like Webb Miller, these are sort of the forgotten heroes of the freedom movement, how much that one reporter did, just by constantly calling, phoning his reports to UPI, spreading what Gandhi was doing. These are people that we've sort of just forgotten. But, one of the most remarkable things about your documentary is that it brings them back into our lives. And let's talk a little about the way Gandhi communicated. It was amazing.
There was one amazing thing about Gandhi was that he was one of the most prolific writers this country's ever had. He was so humble that he reacted to anything and everything. Anybody wrote a letter, they would get a reply.
Right.
It didn't matter who it came from, and that was perhaps Gandhi's greatness, because he was always learning. He didn't have the arrogance of saying that he had all the answers. He evolved with the result that many a time he's been criticized. People said, oh, in Africa, he may have been a racist and all that. He didn't do this thing. But that was the time when he was doing everything with the Indians,
Right.
Indian communities. The moment he came to India, he realized it. And every aspect of it grew. Now, Gandhi's form of communication was very simple. Through his writings, he made sure that every paper of his was in every language. For instance, Raja Gopalacharya used to publish his, writings in Tamil. His writings would be published in Bengali. His writings would be published in Hindi. It wasn't that he used to write in Gujarati and in English. So he had a way of ensuring that it reached out and it was read out to the villagers. It was read out to everybody. This is the way he communicated in a time when there was absolutely no social media, no television. Radio was not available to him because it was owned by the British in that sense, but he still managed, and the power of his moral force was so high that word of mouth ensured that, it reached to every nook and cranny of the country. And you could see that in so many facets of Gandhi. For instance, he's traveling by ship from England to South Africa when he writes the Hind Swaraj.
Right.
And how does he write it? He writes it ambidextrous. He writes a letter from the reader to an editor.
Yeah.
His right hand is writing the questions, and his left hand is the editor answering those questions. That is, this didactic, the dialects that he has all the time asking. And he found it in, he was such a prolific reader that he found it in Thoreau, the sense of civil disobedience.
Right.
He took it from Tolstoy, and he was an ordinary lawyer sitting in South Africa, but communicating with Leo Tolstoy, one of the greatest novelists of that time.
Right.
He found his writings, as I said, in Sermon in the Mount, he found it in the Quran. Wherever he found the beauty of love in action, he took it and adapted it.
Right.
He never said, for instance, when he was in prison, he kept the discipline of the prison in the ashrams, because he realized that when you go to prison, there's an entirely different life for which he was not used to in the early days. Then his wife came to him one day, Kasturba. It's not there in my film, I know, but I wish I added it. I'll have to make a second part for that. She told him,
I think you can make many more films.
Yes, I have enough material. It's already there. Kasturba tells him that you have done everything for the men, but do you know, we women have a different physical attributes, and in the prison, we'll have a different kind of a life. He then realized that, oh my God, I've forgotten that these people have to be trained also, women. So he got Kasturba to train the women of how to adapt to prison life. This is so great about Gandhi, and that is how he communicated. He made sure that people were inspired by him. He made sure that what he was talking about, he led by example. When he came to India, what was the Congress Party? It was a party, it was a club of suited, booted people. Yes, the gentry who came from England, all of them lawyers, very good. They're discussing independence, but not doing anything. Gandhi, for 1 year.
A little like the party now, Ramesh.
Well, probably it's going back, full circle, But Gandhi, what did he do? He first traveled all over India because Gokhale told him, you have to understand this country. And Gandhi had not understood the country. He had understood the diversity of the country in South Africa because that was there in a minuscule way. But he came here and he went everywhere. He went to the Kumbh Mela. He went to meet Rabindranath Tagore. He went and met all the religious heads of every religion. And he realized, my God, this country, and he didn't say a word for 1 year. It was almost like as if he was on Monbart. He was only absorbing. And he took on the dress of the absolute common man. Which is why the talisman of Gandhi has always been like the politician who came to him and asked him, how do I know that the policy that I'm implementing is the right policy? And Gandhi said, think of the poorest man in your country. If your policy can take away the tears from his eyes, it's the right policy. So in every aspect, he thought of the last man standing. That empathy that compassion, that sense of goodness that he brought in, that spirituality and ethics that he brought in, the sense of truth that he brought in, that made Gandhi almost unparalleled as a leader in the world.
And I love that point. You have Jan Urban, I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Jan Urban.
In Czechoslovakia, who
In
said
Prague,
that
yes.
1987 they showed Gandhi, Richard Attenborough's Gandhi, on state television, and what a big mistake it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
he says people were cheering in the halls, because they realized that that this is not about Gandhi, this is not about the British, this is about our oppression. We are being oppressed by the Russians, by the communists, and we said to ourselves, non-violence is the way out, because they realized that the moment they had violence, the communist apparatus was so strong, they would crush them. And that is happening. We see it in India today. Whenever there is a non-violent movement, you find the first thing that the establishment does is tries to provoke them into violence.
Yeah.
Because
then the farmers, you saw it with Shahid.
It is there in the CA when the Citizen Amendment Act, agitation took place with the student. Everywhere. Absolutely. Everywhere you find the establishment always tries to create a trap and provoke the agitators or the people who are doing non-violent demonstrations into violence. The moment that happens, that's the end of the agitation, the end of it.
But
because
sorry, Ramesh, let's also talk about, because you end with George Floyd, and those powerful words, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. That's really all of us now in many,
all over the world.
All over the world.
But to me, it was very symbolic, because I have come to a stage now when I realize in my life, I don't know about others, but in my life, I've realized that we have let down everybody.
Yeah.
We are sliding into authoritarianism around the world. Democracy is becoming a mockery. It is a mockery not just in India or in England or in Europe. It is a mockery in America, which is supposed to be the most democratic country. And one of the things that Gandhi has always said, which most of us forget, is that his non-violence was not just getting freedom. It didn't end with 1947.
Yeah.
That day he didn't want to celebrate, because he realized that India had been partitioned and Hindus were after Muslims and Muslims were killing Hindus. And he said, this is not the India I wanted. He didn't want a Hindu that was a theocratic country. He wanted a Hindu that would be secular, and he couldn't achieve that. But he believed that the country should go on, that the tenets of non-violence and ahimsa that he spoke about would absolutely be the pathway, and it's a long drawn thing. Non-violence is not like a knee-jerk thing that, okay, today I put out my gun and I surrender and that's the end of the war. No, it is the change of heart.
Yeah.
It is the change of your attitude. It is the bringing of compassion and empathy to life, to your policies. That is when non-violence works. And that takes years for it to happen. You have to transform yourself as a human being. And we cannot do that unless the younger generation takes up and truly believes in the essence of Gandhi. And that is why I made this film. So I would think that all these people in my film become inspiration. They become an iconic inspiration, because there are no heroes left in this world today. Yeah. I can only think of one hero today, probably would be the Dalai Lama. Right. If you think in terms of what non-violence is today. And he is also, helpless.
Yeah.
But he at least continues with it. His moral force is still there. Everywhere else. I mean, I think, okay, Joe Biden has come and we are cheering him. But when he was with Obama, they brought in the greatest drone attacks in the world.
Right.
It's not that these people are actually empathetic and compassionate. Yes, they are compared to Donald Trump. But everywhere else, I mean, look at what's happening in Poland. It's sliding into right-wing authoritarianism. Look at what's happening in Hungary. You look at what's happening in England after Brexit and, all these things that were with that Lafarge fellows and or you see everywhere, even in America today, they're attacking. Have you ever seen an attack on the Capitol House trying to overturn an election?
Amazing.
It is, and the way the blacks are being shot at by the policemen. In India, we have the caste thing. You see those women who sit in water when the water from the dams are being sort of put out, and the villages are being drowned. And these women have no way to do. They have no arms, nothing. So what did they do? They stood in the water for 15, 20 days. The fishes were nibbling their feet. The fish nibbling at their feet. They're getting blisters. They're getting sore. Ultimately, the government had to give in. The country is becoming ungovernable because everything is about hatred and division.
Yeah.
There is not a political party today left in India that you can think in terms of saying that, yes, this political party believes in compassion. Neither the Congress, because they are responsible for so much of the evil that has taken place,
Right.
nor the ruling party, nor the communists. Everyone, if the communists were there in Calcutta, in Bengal for so many years, 30 years, they could have transformed Bengal. They didn't do it.
Yeah.
So we are actually in the cusp of destruction. We're in the cusp of physically destroying ourselves, morally destroying ourselves. We're in the cusp of completely obliterating whatever mankind stands for, which is why I think I ended the film with that great quote of Martin Luther King,
Yes.
that the choice is not between violence and non-violence. It's non-violence or non-existence.
Non-existence. That's such a powerful way to end the film. And the other thing, Ramesh, how difficult it must have been when you made it seem so easy to get people like the Dalai Lama, to get people like John Lewis, Reverend Lawson. I mean, these are iconic figures. To get them.
I'll tell you very honestly, this is the toughest film I've ever made.
Yeah.
And I knew that when I began the film, I had huge ambitions. And I knew that if I didn't get them, the film would not be made. And somehow the word of Gandhi, the name that I was making a film on Gandhi, and I was making a film on Ahimsa, it moved them because they all realized a film like this was required.
Right.
John Lewis told me, he said, this is something that we needed. I want your film to be in every school.
Right.
I want to show it to every congressman in the Congress. James Lawson said the same thing to me. He said, I want this everywhere because I believe that is the only way out. He came to India to study Gandhi, as a young man, James Lawson.
Yeah.
I mean, he's now 89 years old. And I was so scared that I wouldn't be able to get his interview. And he was, he drove himself and his mind was so absolutely fresh and
so beautifully.
And you saw when John Lewis died,
yeah,
the two people who paid tribute
were
Obama and Reverend Lawson. So I mean, I was and even Mr. Lech Walesa, though he speaks in Polish, I had such a tough time getting to him.
Obviously, I mean, he was like the greatest revolution.
Absolutely. And look at them. And so many of them, they were all Nobel Prize winners.
Yeah.
So
I don't know how many Nobel Prize winners you have in the movie.
I had in the movie, the Dalai Lama was there. So was this man, what do you call, Desmond Tutu was shown. Yeah. Unfortunately, he's in his very, very ill. He couldn't. Yeah. He would have loved to have given me an interview. I couldn't get it because he was really practically on his deathbed. Obama, he gave me the footage. He said, okay, I cannot give the interview. He was too busy. But I got it from his library.
That is a wonderful speech
on Selma,
brilliant.
The 50 years of Selma March, and I mean, I really worked hard on all of them and, and getting the visuals to match them. The archival footage is so expensive around the world when you're taking rights for all over the world. I had a researcher in America, in Washington. I had a researcher in Czech, in Prague. I had a researcher in London. I had a researcher in Delhi, in Bombay. I had a researcher in the, Nehru's, Teen Murti.
Yeah.
There to get, I had to get, and then I had a researcher in Ahmedabad, So this to me was one of the most, and I had no budget. A lot of them worked with, what I call practically no money.
But that's a tradition with you. You also meet people like Gulzar and Shakti Kapoor work for nothing.
I think you have to basically excite
the idea
with the idea, you know.
Excite.
And one of the things about Gandhi was that he was an animator of values.
Yeah.
You know, once you animate people with values, I mean, frankly, tell you the truth, I owe a lot to my wife and daughter, Uma and Sanjeta, because they were the logistical support I had. I had no production team.
Right.
They were my production team. You know,
yeah.
I had, you know, they put in the last bit of money to complete when I ran out of it. You know, I had to pay some license fees and for the music, you know, and I got some music from all over the world.
Right. Even the music is wonderful. And you know, that one picture, that Margaret Burke White's picture, that photograph, my God, it is, I think it is one of the most stunning and also shocking photographs. Talk to me about acquiring that, because it's very rarely seen.
Well, you know, I took it all from Getty Images.
Yeah.
We licensed it from Getty Images because all the Life magazine work that she has done, it was done for Life magazine. It's with Getty. So I took it from them, and they gave me, because I bought a bulk, I bought a lot of pictures from them. They gave me at a fairly reasonable price, but I had to use them because the footage that I had footage also, the very bad condition.
Yeah.
You know, they really didn't capture the horror.
Where did you get the footage from?
Look, in the British, archives, there were in BFI, and you know, there was some footage available in a place called, there's an American thing called some history, I'm forgetting, Critical Past. It's called Critical Past. It's a library of archival things. There are about 20, 30 of those. My researcher got it from me, but a lot of footage I got from the Library of Congress, which was in public domain.
Right.
You know, there's American propaganda film that's always been made.
Right.
You know, and now it's open, so it's in public domain. So but we had to research it. We had to get it. You know, we had to transfer it and bring it to India and edit.
How long did the movie take you, Ramesh?
Well, it took almost 2 years, you know, to the making of it, because first half year was research. And then, of course, getting the interviews, the logistical part of it. You see, I didn't have too much money. So I had to make sure that if I went to America, if I am interviewing John Lewis today, and he's in Washington, I have to make sure that I get Reverend Lawson the next day in Los Angeles, because I have to fly. Otherwise, I have to pay for hotel bills with my camera team, you know, cameraman and assistant. Then I had to fly to Rochester to get Arun Gandhi. Yeah. Then I had to go to New Haven to get Rajmohan Gandhi. So you have to make sure that the dates had to be coordinated and all of them should be available. And then when I'm going back to London, I had to get Mary Elizabeth King in Oxford. Then from there, I had to fly to Poland. But of course, I had to make 2-3 trips to do that. But fact of the matter remains that coordination and getting the time from those people. Then I had to go back to America again to get Kerry Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's daughter.
She was wonderful.
So, you know, if you don't have people who are the ringside players or people who have experienced all this themselves, you cannot make a film with credibility.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't want to have a voiceover. I wanted everything to be said on the words of these people. I didn't want some third person narrating it.
Right. I mean, there is another way of making this documentary, but you wanted, these people were critical to it.
Absolutely. And if I hadn't got John Lewis or Reverend Lawson, believe me, I would not have had the power of that segment.
I agree.
You know, and if I didn't have Tridip Surhud and Ram Guha talking about the historical aspect of Gandhi, again, the credibility of it would be lost, because those were other very brilliant minds in India. You know, and Rajmohan Gandhi, absolutely brilliant in understanding of Gandhi.
Absolutely. It was just, and even in South Africa, had Lord, I'm sorry, I'm
Peter Hain, Lord Peter Hain. He's not in South Africa. He's in England. He's a Labour MP.
But he's talking about
because he's written a book. He came from South Africa, and he's an author of a book on Mandela.
But what powerful words he has.
Absolutely. He's a fantastic guy. He's just written, in fact, we are still in touch. And, you know, he was absolutely incredible. And he knew it. His mother used to go to the trial of Mandela, and
Wow.
she was a white woman, and everybody would look at him because she would give the signal of the African ANC in the courtroom
Wow.
to Mandela. And, so they were all very worried. In fact, he talks about, I didn't use all that in my film, but a wonderful thing. And then, having said that, you need a fantastic cameraman.
Yeah.
Nitin Upadhyay, who shot this for me, brilliant young cameraman,
What is your
That's,
relationship with cameraman? How did you get Subrata Mitra for your?
well, that's it. Again, inspire him, get them excited about visuals. What do cameramen want?
Yeah.
They want challenges. They are used to so much work being done routinely that if you tell them, look, this has got a different look. This is the kind of lighting I want. If they're excited, believe me, they will do anything for you. And it's the same thing with Nitin. He gave up so much of his ad work because he felt that this was something so important that I was doing. Same thing with the editor, Yamini Upadhyay, taking hours and hours of this archival material and these photographs and then weaving them into some kind of a narrative that told a story. It's not easy. I'm telling you, it looks easy, but it's the most difficult thing to do. And you must have so much patience, to keep on going.
You must have so much command over your subject.
Absolutely.
You know exactly
that I must say, I researched. I have never read so much in my life. I wrote the script beforehand, not a script, but what I call the blueprint, and that's what the way I work in editor in my own documentaries. I make a kind of a storyline in my head, and then I go and shoot everything. I get the interviews and everything, and then on the editing table I shape it. Then you change, then you realize, and sometimes you go back and reshoot some portions or add some portions, get some photographs, B-rolls, but you already have it in mind when you're talking to somebody. You know that I have asked this to John Lewis, I must ask this to Reverend Lawson. I must go back to the historian to revalidate whatever has been said by John, so I get a different point of view.
When I think it's John Lewis who says that it is time to redeem the soul of the world. My God, those words are so powerful, and
yes.
those words, and I think the words of Mary Elizabeth King, which I've noted again: no system can stand if people refuse to cooperate.
Absolutely.
Those are the words that make this film so relevant and so contemporary.
And that is what Gandhi was. Exactly. You see, Gandhi understood that. He understood that.
He was timeless in a way.
Absolutely. He understood that the British or in Africa or anywhere, the tyrants could take over only because the people allowed.
It is the same here.
Yeah, absolutely. The day the people realize that, yes, this
they
is
have the
wrong,
power to say
enough of it.
Absolutely.
The power to say no, that's all you need.
Yeah.
No, I don't accept this.
And we have done this before as a nation.
We've done this before. Absolutely. We've done it during the emergency.
Yeah.
And so we can do it again.
Very powerful,
this is what every political leader must understand, that if you take people to granted and you do not do what they want and you torture them, you kind of take away their dignity. And if they say, no, enough is enough, that is the end of your regime.
It is happening to Black Americans. It is happening to us.
Everywhere.
It's happening everywhere.
Everywhere. And, and I'm hoping that this kind of a film will allow a younger generation to realize that we have to only say no. That we have to make sure that as long as you do it for a good cause, as long as John Lewis says, for a good fight.
Right.
It must be for a good fight. And that's what James Lawson also said. Gandhi, took it because he believed in a good fight. And therefore he aligned himself with the power of the universe.
And I think that is something that makes me say that the journey of your movie is actually just begun.
Oh,
I think it is now in its viewing, in the way it will be seen, it in the way it will be appreciated, in the way it will
You
be
know,
distributed. That really is now the biggest
absolutely. I mean, next week
challenge.
is my first screening in London at the BFI on the
Right.
20th. The film is being screened there. But my greatest hope is that this film somehow gets into the educational circuit, the
Yeah.
university circuit. And that's what we are doing. In October, November, I have a distributor in England who is basically on from friends who are taking it to 17 universities and having screenings in each one of them, followed by a symposium.
Yeah.
And to me, that is
It
more
needs that.
satisfying.
It needs that.
I want to do that in India. I want
Yeah.
somebody to fund me and get this translated in different languages and take it to universities and colleges here and show them that this is what can be done. This is what I come back to it again, bringing ethics and morality and spiritualism into our daily lives, not religion, spiritualism.
Spiritual. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think this is going to take up the better part of your year.
Absolutely. I hope so. I hope the pandemic will allow me. That's my greatest fear is that, honestly.
No,
Otherwise,
I think this film will find its way.
I hope so.
A most powerful.
One thing is that I'm happy is that this film is, in many ways, it's got a shelf life.
Yeah.
There is a certain timeless quality to Gandhi.
Right.
It's not time bound.
You don't need an anniversary. You don't need a special day.
You don't need. No.
Yeah.
You can do it anytime.
Is there anything else that you're working on that we should know?
Well, at the moment, I am working on something very, very major, for which I'm again looking for funding. And unfortunately, again, my research has stopped because of the pandemic. I'm working on a film called The Forgotten Genocides. It's on Bangladesh, the killing that took place in 1970, 71, where hundreds of thousands of women were raped.
The butcher of
absolutely,
Bangladesh.
The butcher of Mirpur.
Right.
And also I'm comparing it with what happened in Rwanda, because one of the things in Bangladesh that I'm doing, and in Rwanda also, is I'm basically looking at it from a geopolitical angle, because what happened in Bangladesh could have been stopped by Nixon and Kissinger.
Right.
And they didn't do it because they were so busy trying to woo China, and General Yahya Khan was their conduit. And Archer Blood's great book, The Blood Telegram, talks about it all.
Absolutely.
And the same thing happened in Rwanda. The Rwanda killing of the Tutsi by the Hutus, it was all encouraged by the French. It was encouraged by the Belgian. It was encouraged by the CIA from the Congo. So geopolitical events actually have a really big role to play in the genocides that have taken place. Yes, there was a flaw. There's what you might call, a flaw within the society, or there was the cracks within, but they exploited it, and they did nothing to stop the inhumanity. And that is a kind of a colonialism. That's the what I say, the gift of the wicked gift of the colonial regimes around the world. And I want to do a film on that now.
Wonderful.
To show the darkness of it all.
I don't think there's anything that can stop you. If you
I
can make a movie that is so all-encompassing, it has so many characters, it has so many countries around the world. I don't see, Rwanda and
I hope
Bangladesh.
So. I hope so. No, not only that, I have to go to US and get Kissinger before he passes away.
Oh yes, of course.
And I found one of the beautiful things is that I found tapes of Nixon's, which is available now. It's in public, not in public domain, but declassified.
Right.
And
wonderful.
where he talks about all the entire what they did in Bangladesh.
I think that is something that we really watch out for.
Yeah,
please. Sharma, thank you very much for joining us. And
thanks a lot. And it was lovely talking to you.
A movie that has, as they say, it's got legs, right?
That's what I want. I want its legs, and I want its shelf life, and I want it to run out, around the world.
Right.
Thank you very much.
That was such a nice thing. Sorry, just to end with that. And I don't know who says in your movie that just walking became a form of rebellion, became a
Brilliant.
form of
Absolutely.
revolution with
Yes.
the Dandi March. So wonderful.
Yes.
Just a
Yes.
simple act.
Tridip says that.
Yeah,
Tridip Swarup.
it's so wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Yeah,
Thank
all
you.
the very best.
Bye.